Hi everyone, it's Miss Brenner. Today I'm going to be going over foreshadowing notes with you on Edpuzzle. The reason we're using Edpuzzle is so that way I can ask you questions as we go through the essential topics today. So let's start off with what is foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is when an author mentions or hints at something that will happen later in the story. The author is giving readers a chance to make a prediction about what is yet to come. Now, sometimes the author hints at things and is really just creating a red herring. A red herring is a hint that throws you off track or off path to make a off-kilter prediction. So that way at the end there's a surprise and you're like, man, why didn't I think about that? Because when you look back, you can see the elements lining up to have that end. Some things that might come to mind that do this are like The Sixth Sense, if you've ever seen that movie. You can look back and see all of the hints are there, but you might not have seen that conclusion. Now, with that, oftentimes authors do give very clear hints in hopes that you will be able to create a prediction that is spot on with what they're going for, because they want you to have an enjoyable experience throughout their story. The way that they create foreshadowing is by creating dialogue of characters to hint at what may occur in the future. So dialogue is when characters speak to each other. This could either be through quoted lines, or some authors prefer to have characters speak where the lines are separated one after another. Characters can also have an event or action in the story which may throw a hint to the readers about future events or actions. So before we said that plot only progresses by character action or character growth. Foreshadowing tends to happen with character action, either by spoken or by physical action. Forms of foreshadowing. Oh no, do not link, we don't want that. Alright, forms of foreshadowing. The most basic form of foreshadowing tends to pop up with titles of books, stories, plays, novels, movies. Authors tend to like to throw it in there. So, for example, the play The Contents of a Dead Man's Pocket might give you a little bit of a hint what the play might be about. And the fact that most likely there probably is a dead man in the play, and we most likely will go through the contents of his pocket. But that's just one easy way. We're going to look at some of the more in-depth ways authors tend to foreshadow, the more artistic ways. And these are our different signposts. When I say signposts, I'm going to be referring to these. So, authors foreshadow using signposts called contrasts and contradictions, words of the wiser, aha moments, again and again, memory moments, and tough questions. We're going to go over each of these. You will then, after we've concluded this Edpuzzle and the notes, look at some examples of these and decipher what forms of foreshadowing the author seems to be using. Alright, let's talk about a contrast and contradiction. This is when the character does something different from what you would expect. Ask yourself why the character is doing that. For example, a character who is often shy and quiet suddenly stands up for himself, herself, or herself, or another character. This action is odd for this character and foreshadows growth. Big character changes oftentimes give us an idea as far as how the novel might change over time. So, in the future, there will be a video, and you'll have to decipher if that is one of the foreshadowing signposts being used. Another signpost would be words of the wiser. When an older or wiser character gives the main character advice, ask yourself what the lesson might be, or how it will affect the character's life. For example, a character who has more experience involving a task offers advice to a character who is beginning to learn about a task. So if you've ever followed Lord of the Rings, maybe you've noticed that oftentimes there are younger characters with less experience, and then there are a little bit more mature characters with a lot of experience, and they're paired up. And the reason that seems to be is this form of words of the wiser. The more experienced, mature character will kind of point the way for our main character, who is more naive. And this is all elements of foreshadowing. Another signpost for foreshadowing is an aha moment. This is when a character suddenly figures something out or understands something. Ask yourself how that moment might change things. For example, a character who is facing a dilemma, has a moment of euphoria, or is like that light bulb moment when it goes off in its head, where the solution just hits them. They just all of a sudden know exactly what to do. That is your aha moment, and that's oftentimes when a story completely changes. It is near the climax, because the character has come up with a solution for their major problem. Another element of foreshadowing is again and again. Now, this is oftentimes used in picture books, poetry, younger level novels. Again and again, or repetition really, is a simple way to foreshadow what's going to happen. When something is repeated in a book, ask yourself why the author thought it was so important to repeat that again and again. Oftentimes, let's say they keep referencing how there's an oddly built brick wall in this house, and it looks like that wall has fresh plaster in between the bricks, and they just keep going back to that wall again and again and again. Maybe consider, is there something behind that wall? Because they obviously think it's extremely important to keep bringing it back up again and again. Or a character keeps talking about fireworks they just purchased and has been carrying them around in his, her, or her pocket, is playing with fireworks when talking, keeps joking about them with other characters. What might the author be trying to hint at? If it's a happy story, maybe they're going to use the fireworks. If it's not such a happy story, maybe something's going to happen, because accidents tend to happen with fireworks. I don't know. Elements of foreshadowing. Alright, memory moment is another signpost for foreshadowing. This is when the action is interrupted and the author tells you about a memory. So this might be considered also kind of like a flashback, if you see those in TV shows, when a character thinks about something that has already happened. This would not be a flash forward. This is only for memories that have already occurred. Ask yourself why the memory might be important. There has to be a reason that an author would make a character think back to something that is not currently happening in the plot in order to somehow push the plot forward. They typically won't do that for no particular reason. So a character has a flashback to a time with a similar event that took place, and maybe they'll learn from that past experience and do the right thing this time. Alright, tough questions. As far as a signpost, this one is when the character asks themselves a really tough question. And think about what the tough question makes you wonder. Oftentimes, these kinds of tough questions are things that we oftentimes think about ourselves. Such as a character has lost their memory due to a tragic event and wonders if they will ever truly find himself, herself, or herself. So, it could be anything from wondering what the meaning of life is, to wondering why people have to die, to wondering why life seems to be so difficult just for me. Sometimes characters really struggle with this idea of being a little bit self-centered, and so they focus on themselves continuously at the beginning of the novel, and then through foreshadowing they learn to grow and see beyond themselves. These are tough questions that oftentimes people struggle with on their own, and that's why the author is reflecting it in their own writing. So let's talk a little bit about an example. Let's talk about Little Red Riding Hood. I'm hoping that several of you have heard of this small narrative. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived with her mother. Her mother asked her to take her old and lonely grandmother some food one day. And this is what her mother said. Don't stop along the way. Go straight to your grandmother's house and back. Don't talk to any strangers, and watch out for the wolf in the woods. Now get along. So based on that quote from her mother, I mean, it's good advice, but not exactly the most common advice. So the author put it there for a reason. What form of foreshadowing do you think it is? So a mother's forewarning is a form of foreshadowing. This occurs in a lot of different morals throughout small, like mythical books that I'm sure that you've heard, picture books of all kinds. But a lot of times a female of elderly character tends to foreshadow some kind of event as a mother figure. And what form of foreshadowing does that seem to be based on your response to Red Riding Hood? Alright, another example would be Goldilocks. So Goldilocks and the Three Bears, if you guys have ever heard of this, this is three bears come home one day, and Mother Bear said in a quiet, gentle voice, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair." Then Little Bear said in a small, squeaky baby voice, I don't want to do voices, please don't make me, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair and has broken it." Then Father Bear looks at his bowl of porridge and saw the spoon in it, and he said in a great big growl, "Somebody has been eating my porridge." Then Mother Bear saw that her bowl had a spoon in it, and said in her quiet voice, "Somebody has been eating my porridge, Little Bear." And Little Bear looked at his porridge bowl and said in his small, squeaky baby voice, "Somebody has been eating my porridge and has eaten it all up." So, based on this scenario, and based on what you might know happens, what form of foreshadowing do you think is being used? Alright, last one. If you guys have ever seen The Lion King, think of that beautiful setting where we have Mufasa and Simba up on the hill, and they're looking out over the savannah, and he's pointing out his kingdom, and they are talking about their future together. And Mufasa says, "Look, Simba, everything the light touches is our kingdom." And young Simba says, "Wow." And Mufasa, "A king's time as ruler rises and falls like the sun. One day, Simba, the sun will set on my time here and will rise with you as the new king." And Simba says, "And this'll all be mine?" Everything. Everything the light touches. Alrighty, guys. So in this scene, Mufasa is touching on some interesting topics that, unless it has some importance to the plot of the story, probably wouldn't have occurred, or at least not occurred on camera, like, in the plot. So, based on that, what form of foreshadowing do you think is being used? Alrighty, guys. So that is the end of our foreshadowing notes. After this video, you are going to go and watch some Edpuzzle videos. They are not like note form, they are short Pixar clips, and I'm going to ask you questions throughout them as far as what form of foreshadowing is being used. If you need any guidance or help, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm just an email away or a Zoom link away, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. Talk to you later. Bye.